All right, hello, everyone. Today is a very exciting day for myself, for our team, and for fans as well. We're celebrating Star Trek Timelines turning 8 years old, and we're really excited for this. For people who don't know me, I am Ben, Senior Product Manager at Tilting Point Games, and our very special guest today that has appeared in many a Star Trek episodes series. This person worked very closely with us and our team on the narrative of Star Trek Timelines and has been a development partner since the Disruptor Beam days, even before launch. You all know him as Q, John Delancey. John, thank you very much for joining us.
I'm delighted. And you're quite right. It started 8 years ago when I came to Boston, and a very memorable meeting, very memorable. I think it was right 3 or 4 days that I was there, and a collaboration with Jessica, the writer, for many years, and so yeah, it's great to be back.
Awesome. Yeah, John, we asked you to come on for our stream to help celebrate Star Trek Timelines turning 8. And which is an amazing achievement to everyone that has worked on the project, from to people that are still working, to people who have worked on the game in the past. And it's something really special. So really appreciate you taking the time. And John, I remember, I think it was during COVID, our previous writer Jessica, who worked very closely with you on the original narrative for Star Trek Timelines, set up a call with you and the dev team so we could have just a virtual chat and just ask questions. And I remember that experience was such a blast and such a morale boost, as the world being what it was during that at that time during COVID. And it was truly a special moment for me and the team. And I still talk about it all the time, but I remember we talked a lot about your love of sailing, your love of travel as well. So we had such an amazing time. We wanted to try to replicate that with our Star Trek players as well. So we have a bunch of Star Trek Timelines community questions for you. Um, and so we can dive right in if you're ready.
Fire away.
All right. So when you filmed your first appearance in The Next Generation, did you expect it to become such a significant part of the Star Trek universe?
Well, I am omnipotent and omniscient, so of course I knew. I even knew we'd be talking, 37 years ago when I first did Star Trek. I knew that you and I would be talking today. No, of course not. It was very much a one-off. It was very much something that I had simply been hired for the month, the 2 weeks ultimately that I shot, and be done and to walk away from and to never think about again. It was only Gene Roddenberry on the third day of shooting who came up behind me and said, "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into." That I began going, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "Oh, you will find out." And so here it is. And here I am.
That's amazing. Um, so, what has your favorite or most memorable costume that you've worn as Q as part of any of the series?
Oh, well, I mean, I think the most iconic one is the judge's robe, which, really came out of the notion of the Vatican, or some papal robe. And I have to say the outfit that I had for Picard, I thought was terrific. And what people didn't get to see in that very much, because it was very subtle, is that when I turned my back, there was a whole, not applique, but it was all woven. The back is a whole kind of design and things like that. I said, "Oh my God, this is going to be on so many motorcycle jackets in years ago. Star Trek motorcycle jackets." So those two were the best, and all of the rest. the Starfleet outfits, I bemoan just like all the rest of the cast, 16 hours a day in polyester, um, which is riding up. Oh no, not so high up. So those are the two outfits.
That's great. Yeah, I know our Judge Q we have in game Star Trek Timelines, and very very popular one. That
Yeah.
motorcycle jacket sounds awesome. I think I need to find one on Etsy or something now.
Oh
That
well,
sounds
yeah.
great.
No, you should take a look. Um, they don't usually, as well, they shouldn't,
Mm,
usually shoot my back,
right.
you know, and I'm happy about that. Forgive me, I've come back from Japan with a cold. Um, but if there's a shot of my back, you will see the back of the jacket. You will see this wonderful design.
Yeah, it makes me think really curious about as well. For I know a lot goes into costume design and all of that, but I'm really curious of maybe how much of that is not seen on the screen. Um, so that's really fascinating.
There is so much work that is done, and the amount of times. I mean, there's the designing, then there's the approval, then there's the collecting of the measurements, sort of. Um, then you are brought in, and there is the placement of it, and it's still with pins and loosely sewn, and new measurements are, and then that goes back to the tailors, and then it's brought back. Then you come back a second time, and and in my case a third time, just to get everything really, you know, really perfect.
Wow. And I think our character art approval for Star Trek Timelines is can be rough, but that sounds a lot more in depth than I thought. So that's really interesting.
Yes, and it takes a long time. So
Hmm.
I kind of remember walking in, like on the third time, already with an apology, sorry, saying, I'm pretty sure I'm the exact same weight as I was when we first."
Do you keep any of the costumes or just have them for
No,
no?
no, no, no.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, cool. So on to the next question here. So how did you and Jessica work together on the story for Star Trek Timelines, and what was that process like? That was a little before my time, a little before Joe's time. But yeah, we just want to know how that process was like going back and forth with our writer.
Well, I'm going to get back up even a day from when I met Jessica. I was brought in, uh, and there was a meeting at kind of a corporate resort. That started early in the morning, as I recall, around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was to be an all-day event where everybody in the team, I think there were 45 people, were and whiteboards everywhere, and there was a lot of strategic talk and stuff like that. I was brought in the morning, as a surprise to the team by John, who was the person who ran whose idea this was, who ran the company,
Hmm.
to sort of give credence to the fact of, hey, we're really moving along here. And not only that, but the guy who plays Q is, ta-da, that type of thing. And it was the first opportunity that I had ever had. I mean, I've never worked in the corporate world or the business world. I've only worked in my end of in the drama world. I found it to be really fascinating. I mean, tend to have a little bit of a business head already, so I just found it really fascinating. Not only was there were there stories or discussions about what the future would bring for the company, but there were also discussions about where they were, what had been developed up until then. This is all before the launch.
Hmm.
What had been developed up until then, and then different heads of departments would get up to the graphic people and the program people and what have you. The next day, I met Jessica. I mean, Jessica was there, and I had said hello, but you're meeting a lot of people. But the next day, she and I sat down, and she said, "Let me tell you what I have in mind." So we began to talk. That's a talk that I cannot honestly remember 8 years later,
Hmm.
but it was really an inclusive talk for which I who have been who this is part of the business that I do understand, storytelling. I go, oh, okay, oh, really interesting. So I would offer her some ideas that I had never been filmed before, but I had to have as an actor. I just didn't pop up out of nowhere, so I had to create a backstory, and then even though I did not have any intention, at least there was no intention at the time of me doing anything more. As an actor, I needed to have a continuation, just so that there's a beginning, middle, which is filmed and which the audience sees, and then an end, a continuation. So I shared with her all of those things. And then she shared with me some of the ideas of where they're going. And then because I deal with linear stories, and then this, and then this, and then this, and then this, and they're not affected by. They come completely from the writer.
Hmm.
But here's an involvement where the writer starts it off, but the fans who are watching and playing the show begin to actually manipulate how the story will go. So that was just a very interesting notion for me. So Jessica and she clued me in on that. And then over the years, and we're still in touch with each other over the years. 2 or 3 times a year, she would say, "This is where we are, and what do you think?" And or I'm having a problem with this idea, or "Hey, Jessica, I was thinking about such and such, and I know that this is going to happen. Have you thought about that?" So it would be that type of work. She and her team, but in most cases, I think it was mostly her because she's so prolific, was just doing the work. But this was a kind of an opportunity for us, mostly her, to just get kind of fresh ideas and to have somebody to bounce off with, and for me to go, oh yeah, that sounds great.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, that's really interesting to kind of hear that difference between storytelling from a show perspective rather than in games. I know you said that for games it was very much different because the player kind of gets to, have some impact in that. Were there any other differences or complications that you came across that, creating a story for games rather than for a show?
Um, well, no, not that I would be dealing with, only because uh, uh, I was not involved in the mechanics of putting this together.
Right.
I mean, you can come up with all sorts of ideas, but in the end, um, they had to be presented to the team who would deliver those ideas, and I believe that some of them like were, yes, well, we can only go that far in this because we've got this other story coming in, and blah
Hmm.
blah 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 blah. So I involved myself in things that had to do with Q, but not in other things. I mean,
Gotcha.
one of the things that people don't um, um, appreciate about storytelling, especially for film and television, is, and I tell it in this story that I did a television show called Legend. It was a steampunk show, and it took place. We shot out in the desert in uh, Tucson, and the first scene was uh, you're seeing silhouetted across the mountain, across the hillside, 100 Indians come up. Okay,
Hmm.
ready to attack.
Right.
And then the next scene is uh, the two of us, what is it? Richard Dean Anderson and myself, flying in a in some sort of bat wings onto a moving train. Okay,
Yep.
all possible filmically, but not for a television show.
Right.
Uh, so we looked at this, the original script, and we went, "Well, those scenes won't be in this episode."
Right.
you know, and you can well imagine the production supervisor went, "That's out." you know, I don't know where the 100 Indians are going to come, but we'll have a couple of them somewhere, and there will be no flying onto a moving train. Choom choom. So a lot of these things are ideas that just kind of go, yeah, wouldn't that be great, and stuff like that, and then reality sets in.
Right.
Um,
No, that's really interesting. Uh, awesome. So we have a few more questions here. So another question. How do you put yourself in Q's headspace after all these years? How has your voice changed for you throughout the decades? And have any experiences in your life altered the way you play your character over time?
oh, well, that's a good question. Very good question. Um, I've always played Q pretty close to the vest. I tend to be somebody who is of the opinion that um, I am the character. So I don't have to go out and invent a character.
Right.
There are certain things that I have to sort of, if it's levers, I have to be more arrogant than I am, or more insistent than I am. But there's a part of me that is already a little arrogant, and there's a part of me that's already a little insistent. So I just need to play those a little bit more. I don't have to invent arrogance or insistence. One of the things in which I said when I came in to talk to them about the Picard series, I said, "Are we are we inventing, or are we reinventing?" Which was a really substantive question, and they knew that it was an important question. If they had said we are reinventing, which would have thrown me back to the way in which I performed the role 30 some years ago, then I would have been very disinclined to do it. It would have been because it would not have incorporated what I have learned and who I've become in the 30 years hence. So I think that my portrayal of this character, which again, I think was successful in large part because it was organic and made sense, that a person of my age and a person of my presence would not be, doing all of this stuff, which was sort of the way in which I was 30 years ago. It was a more mature characterization of the same character. but just time had passed.
Right. No, that's really interesting. Um, so what has been your most favorite memory working on set during your time as Q?
Well, the most favorite memory, I mean, the ones that were from TNG have disappeared, have, faded into time. But um, preparing, um, while it's hard work, then going on set and seeing if you can deliver is important, and are memories that I cherish. I will always cherish the last scene. I think of it as the last scene with Picard and myself, when it's just the two of us on those two chairs. We started the scene with a crew. I think there were maybe at least, though I know there were two cameras rolling, so that would be two camera crews, and there might have been a third camera rolling, although it was over to my left and I couldn't see it. They were in darkness. And 40 minutes later or so, 45 minutes later, when the scene was shot, um, all of a sudden, and they said, okay, that's a wrap, cut. There was a big applause. And what had started out with, let's say, 10 or 12 people was now an audience of 30 who had silently come during the shooting of that scene to see this essentially last scene between Q and Picard. And that was something that was, and then Patrick had some few words, I a few words, Terry had a few words.
Mhm.
Uh, it was very memorable and meaningful.
Right. And what has been your favorite memory working with the fans or interacting with fans?
The fans, for the most part, are a conglomerate. They know the show far more than we, the actors, do. Again, excuse me for this cold. First of all, and this is something that many fans don't realize. We see the show before, obviously, any of them. We see it as in two dimension on a piece of paper. So we know the story. So if there are any surprises, they take place sort of in our heads as we're reading the story. Then we spend a fairly long period of time learning it, and then going out and filming it, and then that's it. And then it's assembled, and that might be 2 months later. And we will then see little snippets of it on a sound stage where, oh, John, we're adding a line, it's over your back, but we need an extra line there. So you do that. And then you say, hey, listen, okay, I'm watching this scene. Can I see the scene that's just before it? Oh, okay, great. And, can you show me the scene after it? Yeah, okay, great. And there, at least in my case, and I think most actors are the same, we're mostly checking to see whether we have done the job that we thought we were doing, which is really important to us. For which you go, oh, yes, well, boy, I could have taken it further down there. Or no, that actually worked out. It's not, that wasn't so bad. We're making adjustments. And then oftentimes we do not see the show after when it's aired. We just don't see it, because we've lived it. We see it. And we're on to the next show,
Right.
so we don't see it. The fans then take it and they see it the first time. and they add all sorts of stuff. And then they see it a second, a third, and a fourth time. And then they talk about it. These are things that we do not do. And then as time goes on, they what is important about the show becomes becomes clear to them. And then as fans, I hear that back. So that's when I have learned about the show and what it means to the fans and what it means to, people who say to me, why I was going through such a really difficult time, and yet I would come and I would watch the show, and it was, it would really help me so much. Or, gosh, I love the fact that the show brings up philosophic issues that we can talk about as a family. And something that, and here's another one that I hear all the time. It was an opportunity for my father and I to bond, for my mother and I to bond. It was an opportunity for the entire family to come together, and we would watch the show and then we would talk about it. And so I hear all of that after the fact. It's not me who has that feeling. It's the audience who has that feeling, for which I go, oh, wow, isn't that interesting? I see now how important. So that when I go and perform, like on Picard, when I went and performed the show, the scenes, I have a composite in my mind of that audience. That audience is in my head in a theater, and I am performing for them. The people who love the show, know the show, and who appreciate the show. And so I have that composite image of them in my head.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I think there's so many different ways that people have kind of came across Star Trek. Like for me, it was, I watched it with my dad when I got home from school when I was young, and that was my
There you
first
have it.
introduction to it. And
You have it.
and now I'm talking to Q, which is amazing. So yeah, no, that's awesome. And we have time for maybe one or two more questions. But how great was it to have your son play Q with you on Voyager, and how did or does he feel about being a Q? And how is he doing now?
Well, he's doing fine now. I mean, he's a diplomat. He's in the State Department, so he took a completely different point of view. My younger son is actually a little bit more in this business, in that he created a company. He started out as an architect and went off into making designer maps, and then ends up doing a whole thing for me and for a bunch of other Star Trek people on a company that he created called Fanfare. The, the story with Keegan, my older son, who played me, or I mean, played my son, is sort of an interesting one, and that is this: is that one thing that we all know about the character of Q, and that is that he's not terribly empathetic, and he doesn't really care about what other people feel. And he does best in a who's winning and who's on top, and am I going to screw the other guy type situation. Well, that's all well and good, except when you're playing with your actual son, who you kind of go, oh, how are you doing? Is it all right? And, like that. So it's like going out and playing a tennis game, except you're more concerned about your opponent than you are about yourself. So it was great fun, and I'm delighted that he was on it. But it was, as I said, I was a little bit at odds with myself playing a character who's supposed to be kind of ruthless with my son, who I was much more concerned about how the day was going for him than it was for me.
That's a really interesting backstory. Um, all right, so we have about one more question here, and so if like Q offered to Captain Picard in the Next Generation Tapestry, you could choose a different career path. What would it be and why
For myself,
for yourself?
uh, I don't know if there was a different career path for me. I was a kid who had learning disability issues. I mean, I maybe the word disability is not good, but I didn't learn how to read until very late. I wasn't really helped. I'm very dyslexic now. Now we know that. At the time they didn't. Um, I always had sort of a theatrical bent anyway. When I was at Juilliard, uh, John Houseman kept on saying you should be a director, which I always took as kind of a backhanded compliment, meaning that he didn't like my acting. Um, um, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's a part of me that thinks that I don't know. I don't. I've thought of this question a number of times, and I don't really have an answer. I think, well, maybe I would have gone into the military, but I'm not a very good rule follower. Um, and maybe a doctor. Well, I doubt it. I was never a very good student, although I feel like I'm very good at. I feel like I have instinctual. I'm instinctually good at understanding how things are made and operate. So I I don't know. I guess I'm lucky. I'm lucky to the extent that I I chose this profession sort of by default because I did a play when I was 14. I did Henry V in high school or whatever, 14-year-old in sixth grade or something like that, sixth, seventh grade. And I was, I guess, good at it, like really good at it. And and I just grabbed onto that like a life preserver because it was the first time that anybody had said to me anything that resembled good in my school life. I mean, I had already flunked two schools and flunked a grade, so I was in pretty desperate shape. So the fact that they thought I was good at something, I just grabbed onto it and really haven't thought about anything else since then.
No, that's a amazing story. Very inspirational too. I know you're big into sailing. Did you ever think about being a captain or anything like that?
Oh, I could have done that. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I could have done that. It would have been a different, very different life.
Right.
Uh, yeah, that's true. That would be something that I would have enjoyed. Um, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. All right, so that's about time for us. Um, just to swing back on Star Trek timelines real quick. So we have a ton of special anniversary stuff going on in game as Star Trek Timelines is turning 8 years old. So definitely check that stuff out. Free legendary crew, a ton of content, month-long objective events. We have a ton of stuff going on over the next month and beyond that. And so it'll be a very special Convergence Day for us. I hope it is for you all as well. And John, thanks again for taking the time. We really, really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking with you today. And I know the players and the team behind the game really appreciate it as well.
Well, I really enjoy timelines, and thank you. And I'm glad to have been included over this 8 years. It's um, it's an honor.
Awesome. 8 years down and 8 years more. Let's
Eight more years to go. Yeah. All
awesome.
right.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers.
Bye
Uh-huh.
bye.
Bye-bye.